the money's broken so much now that like we actually don't even care about like market
Absolutely.
forces. And it all becomes a social
Yeah, I
control
mean, that's what I
thing.
was saying earlier, right? I mean, I was using the very narrow example of the the recent like legislation or however whatever the right term is, where you can no longer buy certain models of Dell computer because they are deemed like inefficient and non-energy compliant. And I think that this is part of a long history of, again, as I said, like, we see this with refrigerators, water heaters, all sorts of stuff, where there is legislation and regulation imposed on sort of quote unquote efficiency requirements. And the reason that that is perceived as necessary is because the market is so distorted. The energy market is fucked. And this applies to it's so much broader than the energy market though. It's everything.
Yeah, ESG is just an example of what happens when Wall Street takes over a good idea. There's nothing wrong with trying to, do better by the environment and reduce the rate of global warming. There's totally noble goals, but then what happens is you have, oh, terrific, this is great. We're going to create a carbon tax credit rebate system transnationally traded on, and then you have this immense, and then you have all these different framings and recategorizations, productization, securitizations of energy types that can be mixed and tranched and spun into your corporate structure, and you can amortize it over 10 years, and it just becomes this something that it was never supposed to do, and then it doesn't end up actually helping
Absolutely.
anything.
It makes it
How are they supposed to make money if it's simple? Right? If it was simple, they wouldn't be able to make a bunch of money
absolutely. I
financializing
mean,
it.
what it does is it creates this magical arbitrage opportunity for the businesses and the entities that are able and understand what's really going on to take advantage of it. And it's the really tragic thing, and I know I'm not saying anything new here, is that the people that are the most negatively affected by this, lower and middle class people, are the ones that are the most heavily indoctrinated into these belief systems. No one who is successful at playing this game believes in any of this bullshit. They understand that these are arbitrage opportunities, and thus they will drive forward narratives that allow them to continue to capitalize on those opportunities. I think Elon Musk is a phenomenal example of this, but that's going to continue to happen. And one of the things that I struggle with a lot in conversations that I have with, with friends and family is like, how do you how do you shift someone's understanding of like their entire world, right? Like so many people's kind of like core identities. And again, I'm on the West Coast. I'm in the SF Bay Area. This is more prevalent here, so my view is a little warped there. But I just interact with so many people whose fundamental identities are wrapped up in this idea of being an environmentalist, and I consider myself a very active environmentalist. But I understand like nuclear power is phenomenal, and there's just so much dogma around that. I genuinely I find myself at a loss regularly. Like when you try to explain to someone that their core, or that kind of facts that reinforce their core identity or aspects of their identity that they feel are fundamental to who they are. It's very, very hard to unseat those narratives. And I found it very difficult, and I fail most of the time. I'm curious if anyone else has thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Well, this is what's happened with the altcoins too. The Save the Kids, every other altcoin scam that's gone to zero. They had some sort of kernel of truth, of charity, of goodwill, of trying to do something better for the world, and it just becomes subverted because you have this insane profit incentive. So the people are able to just even donate a portion of profits or whatever it is. It doesn't actually matter when you look at the whole structure of the system.
Yeah, I guess going back to what you were saying there, P, I think it's just that universities and a lot of the higher education has been effectively captured, and it has the incentive now is that you just be a panicker and produce, just basically kind of hype up whatever the panic is so that you can get more control and more prestige. And you either win more profit out of doing this or you get more prestige out of doing this. And this applies in many different fields, So
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Stefan. This article I'm researching and putting together right now. I've been re-listening to this episode of The Portal with Eric Weinstein and Peter Thiel, and they talk about the idea of the embedded growth obligation. Just to bring it back from earlier in our conversation, what happened in universities is that there's an embedded growth obligation in universities because you have to have a bunch of people come in. They have to be able to, a bunch of them go on to grad programs, and then a bunch of the grad programs become professors. But what do you do when the population doesn't grow at mass rates anymore, so every single professor can have 10 grad students under them? Right? You have this like decaying element where what could you do? You need to kind of focus them out into the world because they're not going to be getting jobs at universities anymore, right? Like the whole upper educational system, which is subsidized entirely by federal government debt, right? There is no actual economic